There comes a moment when heaven speaks so clearly that everything around you shifts, even if nothing around you looks different. Family, I came with prophetic fire today. Not just with encouragement, but with announcement. God said everything changes on July 8th, 2025. And when he says everything, he doesn't mean something small. He doesn't mean just an emotional release. He doesn't mean a temporary high. He means a divine reversal. He means cycles breaking, doors opening, identity aligning, and purpose unlocking. You may have been walking through confusion, praying through heartbreak, waiting in silence, but God has marked this day, not on your planner, not on your calendar, but in the courts of heaven. He's declaring that what couldn't break before will shatter now. What didn't open before will swing wide now. And what didn't make sense before will come into clarity now. So I hope you didn't come to spectate today. I hope you didn't log on for entertainment. This word is for the desperate, for the ones who've been hanging by a thread, for the ones who almost gave up. Because when God speaks, creation responds. When God speaks, demons tremble. And when he says everything changes, he means your name, your position, your strategy, your strength. It's all about to align. You're not just entering a new season, you're stepping into a divine appointment. So grab hold of this moment because God said it. And when God speaks, everything must obey. When God marks a moment, history bows to prophecy. There are days that feel ordinary. And then there are days that heaven has declared from the beginning of time. These are not just days on your phone calendar. These are days etched into the divine timeline of your purpose. July 8, 2025 isn't just a date. It's a declaration. It's not based on feelings. It's based on faith alignment with heaven's agenda. When God says everything changes, he's not reacting to your circumstances. He's revealing a plan that was established before you even knew you needed change. We often look at change as something we initiate. We say things like, I'm working on myself, or I'm getting ready to turn things around. But the most powerful shifts in your life won't come from self-help. They come from divine interruption. When God decides to move, your history no longer has permission to dictate your future. Your past no longer has the authority to hold your present hostage. His word becomes law. And everything that was once out of order begins to reconfigure itself in submission to what he spoke. See, when God marks a moment, it transcends human expectation. People may look at your life and see stagnation, delay, or even failure. But prophecy doesn't respond to perception. It responds to the voice of the Creator. That's why God will sometimes allow you to endure seasons of silence, not because he's absent, but because he's setting the stage for a supernatural interruption. And when that moment comes, everything that looked like it had the final say will suddenly fall silent. You may have been wrestling with patterns that refuse to break, standing at doors that refuse to open, battling questions that wouldn't be answered. But prophecy doesn't need your approval to perform. It just needs your posture. If God said everything changes, then your only job is to align your faith, prepare your space, and make room for the shift. Because when God marks a moment, nothing can unmark it. Not your mistakes, not your fear, not even the enemy. Think about Lazarus, dead for 4 days, wrapped in grave clothes, hope gone, time expired. But Jesus didn't need time to agree. He needed timing to align. When Jesus called him forth, time had to submit to the command. Death had to bow to prophecy. And that's what's about to happen for someone on July 8th. Everything that's been stagnant in your life is about to respond to a word that's greater than your waiting. History tries to remind you of who you were. Prophecy reveals who you already are in heaven's blueprint. And when God speaks a new thing over you, he is not making it up as he goes. He's pulling the veil off of what was already prepared for you. So don't be surprised when you start feeling pressure before the promise manifests. Prophecy provokes warfare. The enemy doesn't fight what's stagnant. He fights what's marked. And if you've been under unusual pressure, it might be confirmation that your moment is near. This is why you can't measure your worth by what hasn't happened yet. You can't define your future by past patterns. Just because it hasn't happened yet doesn't mean it's not scheduled. And sometimes God will allow delay so that your character can match the size of your calling, because the weight of prophecy is real. And if you mishandle the moment, you can forfeit what was already yours. But here's the good news. What God marks, he maintains. What he speaks, he sustains. What he authorizes, no one can cancel. So while people may doubt your destiny and circumstances may contradict your calling, prophecy will stand. Heaven watches over every word spoken from the mouth of God. And Isaiah 55:11 tells us that his word does not return void. So if he said everything changes on July 8th, then that means the angels are already mobilizing. The earth is already shifting. The spirit is already stirring. And you've got to start living like the change is already underway. Not when it shows up, not when it makes sense, but now. Because when God marks a moment, your faith must move before your feet do. That means praying with greater intensity. That means fasting with greater focus. That means deleting what doesn't serve the new season. That means worshiping while you wait, praising while you're processing, and standing when you don't see a single thing move. Because you're not waiting on man, you're responding to God. History may say you've always been this way. Prophecy says you were never meant to stay this way. History looks at your record. Prophecy looks at his promise. And God doesn't just break records, he rewrites them. So everything that is tried to define you by failure, by divorce, by addiction, by rejection, it all has to bow when God's voice declares change is now. There's a reason this moment is important, because God doesn't just mark time randomly. He redeems it. He restores the years the locusts have eaten. He reclaims seasons that you thought were lost. And when he steps in, it's not just about moving forward. It's about recovering what was stolen. So don't just expect new blessings. Expect recompense. Expect justice. Expect the kind of shift that not only advances you, but vindicates you. This moment isn't just personal, it's generational. Because when God marks a shift, he doesn't just shift your mood, he shifts your legacy. And someone's family is going to feel this change. Someone's children are going to benefit from this change. Someone's bloodline is going to break curses because of this change. You're not just walking into your breakthrough, you're walking into prophetic history. God doesn't need your life to be perfect. He just needs your yes. He needs your faith. He needs your expectation. And if you can believe that everything can change, not gradually, not in phases, but suddenly, then you are in position to see the supernatural move on your behalf. This isn't just hype. This isn't just motivation. This is alignment with divine timing. And when your spirit says amen to what heaven already decreed, everything must respond. Everything, not just your finances, not just your emotions, not just your relationships, but your atmosphere, your mindset, your habits, your discernment, your calling. It's all being summoned into a new alignment. And it starts not with a shout, but with surrender, not with evidence, but with expectation, not with the result, but with a revelation. God said it, and when God marks a moment, history has to bow. One of the most difficult truths to accept in our walk with God is this: your delay does not cancel God's timing. We live in a culture obsessed with calendars, clocks, and control. We think if it hasn't happened by our deadline, it's either dead or denied. But when you walk by the Spirit, you learn quickly that prophetic timing has nothing to do with your personal pace. When God releases a word, it's not waiting on your comfort. It's governed by his sovereignty. God isn't bound by our timelines. He's not panicked by our detours. He doesn't lose sleep over how far behind we think we are, because he never begins with where we are. He begins with where he said we'd be. That's what makes prophetic timing so powerful. It's not a suggestion, it's a sovereign summons. When God says now, everything that was once closed must open. When he declares this is the moment, then every delay that was holding you back must let go. Not because you earned it, not because you were ready, but because he decided it was time. Many of us are living in the tension between what God spoke and what we haven't yet seen. And that space, the gap between prophecy and manifestation, is where the enemy loves to plant seeds of doubt. Maybe it wasn't really God. Maybe you missed your chance. Maybe you're too late. But prophetic timing has a grace on it that supersedes human error. Yes, we make mistakes. Yes, we get distracted. Yes, we delay. But when God marks a season, your delay cannot override his decision. Think about Jonah. He ran in the opposite direction of the assignment. He delayed the call, he complicated the journey, but God's timing didn't change. The people of Nineveh still needed a word, and Jonah, messy, disobedient, and frustrated, was still the one God called, because God doesn't always choose the most punctual. He chooses the most purposed. And even when you resist it, prophetic timing will find you where you are and bring you into where you're called to be. You may have taken detours. You may have stayed longer in places that dried up. You may have wasted time on people who never had the capacity for your calling. But God knew all of that and still scheduled your shift. That's why July 8th, 2025 is not a random date. It's a divine intersection. It's where grace meets alignment, where delay meets destiny, where what seemed stuck suddenly snaps into place. You don't have to have all your ducks in a row for God to move. You don't have to be in your ideal mental space. You don't have to feel ready. All you have to do is respond, because prophetic timing isn't looking for perfection. It's looking for obedience. It's looking for someone who says, God, I may not feel worthy, but if you're still calling me, I'm still answering. That's where heaven moves. Not in polished performance, but in raw surrender. God operates in kairos, not just chronos. Chronos is chronological time, what you measure on your calendar. But kairos is divine timing, what heaven marks as your moment. When you live by chronos, you panic when you feel behind. But when you learn to live in kairos, you realize that a single moment of obedience in God's timing can do more than a decade of effort in your own strength. That's why your delay doesn't scare God, because the timing is still intact, even if the route got messy. Prophetic timing also reveals the sovereignty of God's love, because he doesn't cancel your promise just because you struggled in the process. He doesn't withdraw your assignment just because you wavered in faith. He doesn't alter his word just because you altered your plans. In fact, sometimes he lets us delay just long enough that when it finally happens, we'll know it was all him. So that no man can boast, so that no idol can be credited, so that no pride can rise up and say, I made this happen. It's also important to recognize that prophetic timing is strategic, not sentimental. God doesn't schedule your shift based on your mood. He schedules it based on maximum impact. That means he's aligning things in realms you can't see. He's orchestrating conversations, preparing environments, moving pieces, softening hearts, and positioning people. So while you're worrying that it's taking too long, he's ensuring that when the door opens, it won't close again. Your job is not to make the timing happen. Your job is to recognize the weight of the window, because when that window opens, when that moment hits, you won't have time to prepare. You'll need to already be in position. That's what this season is about: preparation, not performance. Alignment, not anxiety. Faith, not frantic striving. Because when the trumpet of timing sounds, you won't have to push your way in, you'll just walk through. And let's be honest, sometimes we mistake God's timing for divine disinterest. If he really wanted me to do this, wouldn't it have happened already? If this opportunity was mine, why did it close? But maybe what closed was protection. Maybe the delay wasn't rejection, it was insulation. Because if God had allowed the door to open before you healed, it would have killed you. If he gave you the stage before you had roots, the applause would have poisoned you. So his delay wasn't denial, it was mercy disguised as silence. But now the timing has shifted. Now the window is opening. Now the wind is blowing again. And when God says it's time, no devil in hell can block it. No system can stop it. No person can reverse it. But you must respond. Because prophetic timing doesn't wait for you to feel qualified. It waits for you to move by faith. Don't let your delay become your excuse. Don't let your guilt rob you of your moment. Don't let shame keep you sitting in a place you were only meant to pass through. The clock of heaven is ticking. And even if your watch says not yet, your spirit has to say nevertheless. Even if you're tired, even if you're still healing, even if you don't have all the answers, when God says move, move. When God says speak. When God says build, build. Because this moment, this July 8th moment, is a divine override. It's a supernatural interruption. It's the kind of timing that doesn't care what came before it. It's not asking your past for permission. It's not waiting on validation. It's a heaven-ordained release. And the only question is, will you obey it or overthink it? There are things God has been waiting to release, but not until you said yes. Not until you got back up. Not until you let go of the delay and embraced the divine. And I came to tell somebody, God waited for you, but he's not waiting anymore. The time has come. The shift is scheduled. The season has changed. Now you must change with it. Prophetic timing will carry you where your discipline couldn't. It will take you into rooms your resume didn't qualify for. It will break chains your prayers couldn't shatter before. Because this isn't just another season, it's a sovereign setup. And if you've ever felt like you were late, if you've ever felt like you missed it, if you've ever felt like it was over, this is your word. God said everything changes. And when prophetic timing speaks, delay must die. When God is about to interrupt the rhythm of your life with a supernatural shift, he never does it without first issuing an instruction. Before breakthrough, there is always a word. Before manifestation, there is always a moment of obedience. Divine instruction is not just preparation, it's the prerequisite for divine interruption. You can't cry out for God to shift everything and then ignore the very thing he told you to do. We love the idea of miracles. We shout for overflow. We claim abundance. But do we obey the last instruction God gave? Because what unlocks the blessing is not just your belief, it's your obedience. God doesn't move according to how loud you worship. He moves according to how surrendered you are to what he said. Divine instruction might seem small, strange, or even inconvenient, but in the kingdom, the door to everything changing often hinges on a single step of radical obedience. Let's take it to the word. Before the Red Sea parted, God told Moses to stretch out his staff. That wasn't just an action, it was an instruction. And if Moses had waited until the sea opened before he obeyed, the waters would have never moved. The sea didn't respond to the need, it responded to the obedience. Before Naaman was healed of leprosy, the prophet told him to dip 7 times in the Jordan. It wasn't the water that healed him, it was the instruction. Had he dipped 6 times, he would have walked away still broken. But full obedience triggered total healing. What instruction have you delayed? What direction did God give you that you filed under later, not realizing it was the key to now? Because here's what we miss. God's instructions don't come to see if we understand. They come to see if we trust. And trust is proven not by what we say, but by what we do when the instruction doesn't make sense. Sometimes the instruction won't feel spiritual. It might be call your mother and apologize. Delete that contact. Wake up an hour earlier and pray. Let go of that opportunity even though it looks promising. And we think surely God isn't concerned about that. But that's where we're wrong. Because divine instruction is often packaged in simplicity to see if we'll obey without applause. God wants to know, can you obey in private before he blesses you in public? Before July